I'm going to conquer the world. I'm going to be a multimillionaire. How do you feel like you could help someone realize or understand that about themselves?
I started my first business in 2009, one of the worst recessions in history. So I went into a sandwich shop every day with 3 other people. We had a laptop in there, and we're planning our business how you do in your business. It's like those ignition. America loves that stuff. They love the real talk. Of all the mistakes I made in 12 months, number 1 was not building relationships. I leave with appointments. No one does that. I think money is a byproduct of doing something incredible. What about all these employees that have faith in you and confidence? What about your friends and family who thought you were an amazing CEO? What about 23 people that gave you 1.5 million? Had faith and confidence. All these people had faith and confidence, and you failed miserably.
Well, welcome back to the Life Legacy Podcast. Today, I'm pretty excited and honored by having an amazing guest on. So today, we are talking with Shawn Finnegan, and he's kind of best known as a big guy in relationships and a big guy in relationships with business and bringing people together and finding out how everyone can have win-win scenarios, I feel like, in life. And my first interaction with you, all I remember, my first sight was like, this guy is wearing a sweet blue blazer.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, I don't even know who you are, but I'm going to come say what's up.
Yeah, you did. You went right up.
Yeah.
It says a lot about you. Yeah, it was awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And just from learning a little bit about you and what everyone said, today, everyone at home, you're going to learn how to improve your relationships and how to be able to best interact with the people that you want to surround yourself with. And so grateful to have you on, and
Honor.
I'm excited for today.
Thanks for the invite. Really appreciate it.
So to help our audience get to know you a little bit better, what's kind of your why? What's been getting you excited lately?
So I am known as a networker and a relationship builder, but at one point in my life, I wasn't that. And so I grew up in Orem, had a father who was a bookstore manager, BYU bookstore manager for 40 years.
Wow.
He graduated from BYU and stayed there for 40 years. Never left. So picture a bookstore manager. I had the even keel, knew how much he was going to make for 40 years every week.
Wow.
And so I had this original side hustle mom who had to raise 5 children on a bookstore manager pay, and it was really difficult. But I learned scrappiness. Like she started a preschool business. I knew that if I wanted to go get allowance, I wasn't going to go to my dad, bookstore manager, and say, hey, can you get me $5? So I had to go out and learn how to sell on the streets. And so I would go buy, pencils for 10 cents, sell them for 25 cents. I sold candy. I sold pizzas. I sold everything you can. And I'm telling you, if you're a 15-year-old watching this, you should sell something, because it's hard to say no to a 15-year-old standing on the porch, in Lee jeans,
they're the best salespeople,
saying, I have some pencils for you to buy, right? And so that's how I was raised.
Wow.
So I started my first business in 2009, and 2009 was a bad year. It was one of the worst recessions in history. So
definitely
lots of bad things happening. I was actually out of a job at the time, and I wanted to be the first to launch my business and start something. So I went into a sandwich shop every day with 3 other people. We had a laptop in there, and we're planning our business how you do in your business. It's like those ignition moments where it's like the fire starts, right?
Yes, sir.
And I still remember having all my projections. It was going to be a live event business, sell tickets, promote big brands, do big live events, and really excited about it. And according to my spreadsheet, I was going to become a millionaire. I had very little in savings. I had no job, and I was going to launch my first business.
And so in a moment where you have no savings, economy is like the craziest that you've ever seen, and you're like, I'm gonna aspire to be like this person. I'm going to achieve this. How does someone that is in the moment of like, wow, all this volatility of XYZ in their life, and they can still show up and be like, what? I'm gonna conquer the world. I'm gonna be a multimillionaire. How do you feel like you could help someone realize or understand that about themselves?
Yeah, so I met you at the incubator, and I love being around these scrappy because it reminds me of those times.
Yeah.
Like when I'm meeting, I do mentoring at the iHub, and just seeing these young scrappy entrepreneurs. It's like they feel like they want to make an impact on the world. They have this purpose-driven, conviction-driven business, and they want to go make a big impact. And I love that stuff. And the reason why I love
It's the
mentoring there
greatest.
because you lose some of that hunger. You know what I mean? Like I met with someone. I was like, "What is your nut? What? How do you cover your expenses in a month?" And it was like $1,287, and the last $300 was from giving plasma. And they're still just waking up every day, putting on their shoes, going to work, and trying to make this thing happen. And
Yeah,
I think that's the drive it takes to really start.
definitely. And so for you,
Mm-hmm.
what has been that fuel where you're like, I want to make $1 million?
Mm-hmm.
Was it initially money that drove you? And when you got started, what
Mm-hmm.
kind of drove you and what drives you now?
Yeah, so I love education. So I love learning. I read. I'm a voracious reader. I love all that stuff. I have an 18-year-old daughter, and I never stopped reading to her.
Hmm.
And I've read her all the greats, the Think and Grow Rich,
Dang.
all this stuff, The Secret. I've read her all those books. After a while, she's like, "Hey, can we read something more, teenager kind of level?" But I've read her all those things, and I love it. So I think money is a byproduct of doing something incredible,
Hmm.
right? So if you're doing something incredible and you really want to serve people, guess what? Money follows that. You want to solve problems, money's going to follow that. So whatever your mission is, yeah, money's secondary.
Definitely. I I have a big well, with my life, I always just want to add tons of value.
Hmm.
And that's kind of my
Yeah.
foundational piece of like whatever I'm going to be doing, like I'm going to be adding a lot of value to people.
Yeah.
And that's my initiator.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever experience I can give or drive to people,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do the Walmart brand.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we'll probably always be in luxury or premier
Mm-hmm.
because like let's go above and beyond in
Mm-hmm.
creating and not fight for the bottom,
Yeah.
but go for it.
Yeah.
And I that just drives me. Like how can I improve this person's life through this experience and
Mm-hmm.
how can we make this experience
Yeah.
one of the greatest days of their life?
Yeah. Yeah. I think about the hotel business, right? You think about what's the experience when you go to any hotel. There's a counter, you go in, you wait. It's really inconvenient. They hand you your keys and you go find the place, right? One of my favorite places in Cabo, and this place, you pull up, they give you a nice frosty drink. There's no counter to check in. They have a book in front of you and someone's there to greet you. They have a band playing. They have literally, it is the most, from the second you pull up to this place to when you leave, it is the most incredible experience on the
Mm.
planet Earth. And it's 1,000% more expensive than the traditional hotels. And I cannot wait to pay that money to go again. It's the advantage of giving people that true,
Yeah.
unreasonable hospitality experience, right?
So interesting you bring up Cabo. That we don't know each other very well, but Cabo, I've gone to Cabo probably 2 times every year of my life.
Wow.
And we've done like some real estate investing there,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a resort there and I think it was like 2016 it got rated the #1 resort in the
Mm.
world, and exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't wait to go back there. And in
Always.
fact, you go 2 times a year. You
Yeah.
keep going back, right?
Yeah.
And it's more expensive than a traditional one, but customers want to feel that experience
Yeah.
of being catered to and feeling being pampered, and that's a lost art now. We're standard is we think you call a company, you're sitting on hold forever, you're not treated well. I mean, customer service is a lost art now,
Definitely.
right?
Everyone's kind of building their blocked townhouse
Mm-hmm.
of whatever industry they're going into
Yeah.
because you just want to scale and so you get
Yeah.
your process. But
Right.
there's a beautiful art and creativity in having specified types of things that you want to go above and beyond and not
Yeah.
just be a box.
Right.
Let's dive into you a little bit.
Yeah. So I can tell you kind of more about
Yeah.
that initial business, because it was kind of where I created my why.
Hmm.
I have a plan. I go start hiring a few people, and then I realize I have to raise money. So the first time in my life I raise money, and I've
Hmm.
never done it before. And I met with about 70 investors, and I got 23 of them to give me money towards this business.
Which is amazing, by the way,
Lots of
in a
rejection, but there
funding.
is a lot that said yes,
Yeah.
right? And after every rejection, I'm like, man, did I mess this up right here? And what I learned in that process is you got to seek to understand the investor.
Hmm.
So many times, and anyone who has a business, they go, "Hey, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. This is your business, whatever." It's like, no, hey, Jackson, tell me what you're looking for.
Hmm.
What are you trying to accomplish in your investing?
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure that you're getting the right investor matched up with the right money and the right deal. Because if this is the expectations aren't set up front and they want a short-term gain, and you know that you're not going to be cutting checks for 5 years, then that all has to be set up front. So you have to seek to understand what they're going to do, and then when you see the right fit, that's when you go with it. It's a big mistake. I had a couple that I didn't do that with that turned out to be later a massive pain for me.
Oh.
But I raised 1.5 million, and it took me like 5-6 months to do that. But I raised 1.5 million for my business, so it was a happy day for me, right?
Definitely.
At 1.5, my dad's a bookstore manager.
Which you guys, you've never seen money like that,
Never.
you know?
I could show you my operating account, 1.5 million. It was like king of the world moment for me. And I still remember going on LinkedIn and putting that I was a CEO. So CEO, friends are proud of me and family. My mom's proud, and I raised that 1.5, and we do business with Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank guy, and one of his quotes is, "In business, poo poo happens." And over the next 12 months, I made about every mistake you can possibly make in business, and I went from like this king of the world to losing all 1.5, and I got down to where I had a couple grand in the bank, and it was worse than that because I had
Mm.
hawked my house and I'd hawked my cars. I had one car, and I had it hawked,
Mm.
maxed my cards.
And for people that don't know that term, like what does it mean to hawk your house or hawk your
Basically,
car?
you get a HELOC on your house, you go get a credit line on your car, you get everything you possibly can, and it was all tapped for me.
Mm.
And there were some real dark moments in there. And for me, like a dark moment was on a Thursday when I knew payroll was due the next day and I couldn't make it. And it was a scary, miserable time. So I went from 1.5, and I had all this pressure, right? You have a pounds per square inch pressure because what about all these employees that have faith in you and confidence? What about your friends and family who thought you were amazing CEO? What about 23 people that gave you 1.5 million?
Yeah.
Had faith and confidence. All these people had faith and confidence in you. You failed miserably.
And I think it's more than like a business failing, but it's like your identity to yourself. I imagine has to feel like
Yeah.
complete failure. So that Thursday where you're like, I sincerely can't pay payroll.
Yeah.
What is going through your mind?
You basically become an expert on being a failure. You start breaking it down. You go down the rabbit holes of like, oh, why did I do that? Why did I promote this event? Hurricane hits all my direct mail. Direct mail doesn't show up. Why didn't I cancel? You start just questioning everything. It's a miserable, food doesn't taste good. It is a miserable, you have this pit in your stomach as you're walking around. And it's really hard.
Mm.
And it's a lot of times people don't talk about this in business. You hear about the 3 keys to success, but as Elon Musk said, there's chewing glass. And he went through this in 2018. He had to split the baby in between Tesla
In
and
space.
SpaceX. He couldn't decide which one was going to live or die, and he split it, right? But you never hear about that. Now he's one of the wealthiest people on the planet, but you never hear those stories. But those are the stories as you unpack. I think there's two things I've seen in common. Number one is real persistence. And number two is failures. And I've never seen anyone successful not have both.
Yeah. The average millionaire, I would, I'd been in a similar shoes where I was like, I need to know everything
Mm-hmm.
of how to be a millionaire, not for the money metric,
Mm-hmm.
but typically to become a millionaire,
Yeah.
you need to become excellent in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different things, not
Yeah.
just one or two.
Right.
And some people have quicker, straight
Mm-hmm.
pathways to it, but the average millionaire will go bankrupt twice before he makes his first million,
I believe it.
which it's like
I would believe it.
and you see these people on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
Something I actually really love about my podcast is we have phenomenal guests that
Mm-hmm.
have reached very high altitudes
Mm-hmm.
of mountaintops
Yeah.
of success.
Mm-hmm.
And every single successful person I have ever met has had these refiners fire
Yeah.
where they hit these rock bottoms.
Yeah.
But that is where the true learning is, and it helps humanize greatness.
Yeah.
Greatness is achievable from the average Joe as soon
Mm-hmm.
as he wants to change or she wants to change.
Yeah.
Like you are one connection. You are, one more piece of action that you can
Mm-hmm.
do to become great and start the trajectory where
Yeah.
you can have all around financial freedom, real life success. And
Yeah.
it's just there.
It's
It's
true.
possible.
100%. Yeah. I was listening to this podcast the other day and they were talking about how to create bricks, how to build bricks. And you can actually get all the materials for a brick and put it in the sun, and they're sun baked bricks.
Hmm.
But if you actually take that same brick and you put it in fire versus the sun baked bricks, it turns into 10 times the strength
Hmm.
versus the sun baked, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I found is going through that refiner's fire, going through the hard moments. And some people get spun out and they say, hey, I've tried that. I've been burned. I'm never going to go back. Or if you're persistent and you wake up every day and you put your shoes back on, you go back to work and you get things done, you can become stronger and stronger and stronger. All those things, all those failures happen for you, right?
Definitely. You just brought up a good point. And as you were saying that and talking about '08, '09,
Mm-hmm.
there I learned this at my father's funeral that there's about 8 people in his same situation, like so heavily
Mm-hmm.
leveraged in real estate. And um, everyone got nailed in '08
Mm-hmm.
where they almost lost
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And my dad was 24 hours away from losing like his dream house that he
Yeah.
built and all this stuff.
Yep.
But at the funeral, I learned from one of his friends that there were 8 of these people in the same exact shoes,
Mm-hmm.
and there was 2 people that were able to come out of it and do okay after.
Yeah. Right.
And I was lucky
Interesting.
to learn that my dad was one of those
Yeah.
that was able to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just so encouraging.
Yes.
But I think you're about to hit on a paradigm that people need to understand with failure.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think about failure? When you think of failure,
Yeah.
like what do you think people don't understand about failure?
Yeah. So I always ask entrepreneurs, what's a greater motivator, failure or success? And
Always failure.
that's what I've seen. Everyone says that's been through it. And literally anyone who's savvy who's been through it, which is what surprised me the most going through that massive failure is all the people I thought were super successful and had literally the easiest path to get there. When I actually talked to them and I had this authentic conversation and saying, hey, I'm going through this stuff. And this is my problem, and this is my problem to some of the successful people. What I found, what shocked me, is they all had massive stuff. They're like, yeah, I didn't make payroll this time. You hear about like Walt Disney, multiple times, multiple failures, didn't make payroll many times, IOUs to people like Walt Disney. And so what shocked me is all these successful people I thought just had the easiest path, had the hard path too. And I actually got tons of value because I was real with them and told them my stuff. I wasn't going to them with this fake and saying, I'm just crushing it right now. And so I was just amazed. I got some of the best counsel from people who were successful during that hard time for me.
How does someone that's like maybe going through that moment get around the right people to have a better chance of taking some of their failures they're going
Mhm.
through, and these people can help uplift their world?
Yeah. So I meet with multiple, I meet with multiple people a week that are going through the grind. Like, as you know, at the iHub and everything else, I take
Mm.
appointments, right? And I'm amazed how many times entrepreneurs are willing to help and give back. Literally, my friends that are super successful, if someone reached out to them from my hub and said, "Hey, I really want to meet with you and talk," they're willing to do it. But very few people take advantage of that opportunity. You think about anyone you know in your network that's successful, if you reached out to them, they all want to pay it forward. They all want to help.
Yeah.
They feel like they have their own purpose and mission to help people. And so that's a resource that I would 100% take advantage of. And I've had the incredible interactions. Like I had someone reach out and set an appointment and says, I really need a perspective. They were trying to come up with a commission plan. They were trying to come up with, and they had a plan that we're going to launch, and they wanted to see people who had been through stuff like that and get their perspective. And I think that's so brilliant. It's what no one does. Everyone thinks like we've gotten to where we are and that's where we're at the pinnacle and we got it from our own brains. And so they just go with what they have versus like people should sit down with successful people and say, hey, I have this commission plan. Would you mind giving me a perspective? They're going to tell you one or two things. So one, it's here's some big pitfalls because I've done commission plans, or hey, this is phenomenal. I think you've really thought things through. But for the most part, they're going to pick out a couple of things that you should take advantage of and you should fix, right? Very important.
Yeah. Um, it's funny. I have a lot of people in my family
Mm-hmm.
where we have like a push and shove type of feeling on this because I love to learn from people I want to be like in the
Mm-hmm.
next 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side where it's like, well, you have to do all the action.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while I was just more of an educator
Mm-hmm.
that just has all this random new learnings and stuff, but I wasn't great at applying it, and it
Mm-hmm.
took me a really long time. But fortunately, I have brothers on the other side that's like they don't listen to anything; they
Yeah.
just bulldoze and
Yeah. Let's
they're
go it.
they're a
Let's
moving
go for it.
train.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's like, well, who knows where these tracks are gonna end
Sure.
up? But I think a good balance of those two are so important to be able to act and go with your intuition,
Yeah.
mixed with get this validated with people that
Mm-hmm.
have been in your shoes
Yeah.
for 10, 20 years.
Greatest way to learn.
Yeah.
So from that experience, you know, I just from God's intervention, it was on the Friday. I had my controller call me up, find $3,000 in petty cash. I drove back to the office. I went straight to the bank and I put in the 3,000 and I made payroll by $1,000, whatever it was. And I still remember the day I cut the checks and I physically walked in and I handed each person one. It was like this emotional moment for me where I captured everything. I remember every detail about that day because emotionally I was so charged that I just barely made it. And so, like you asked about the failure, like what you should do. I was like, hey, what can I learn from this and how can I grow from this experience? And I actually, if you asked me when I was a kid what I wanted to be, it wasn't a spaceman or something. It was, I want to be a billionaire. I want to be like an empire builder. So I was like, how do these guys do it? I was like, I started pulling up pictures, Google images of some of the greatest empire builders ever. And like when I pulled them up, what I found is rarely were they pictures they weren't alone in pictures.
Mm.
And like Steve Jobs, who's he standing next to? Wozniak. Like, and like I started putting it together. It's like, you know what I've been doing is I've been on an island and I put my head in the sand and I haven't built relationships. It's the biggest mistake I make. Out of all the mistakes I made in 12 months, number one was not building relationships in business. Like Wozniak and Steve Jobs were best friends, right? Steve Jobs wants to go see his spiritual leader in India and he needs money to get there. So he's like, who can I go talk to? So he was a total hippie. So he goes walking into Atari. He's barefoot. He doesn't believe in deodorant. He stinks. He's going on these crazy crash diets where he'll do carrots for a month. You could see orange through his skin. He was like really, and he was brash and everything. So he goes walking in there and they're like, what do we do with this guy? At one thing, he's like disgusting and brash, but at the same time, could he be a genius and fix our problem? Because Atari had a problem where they couldn't fit the amount of chips on the board into the shell. So they have this massive problem, but this crazy man comes in and says, I can fix your problem in like 30 days.
Mm.
And they're like, okay, well, you have to come in at night because you can't be around our staff. So he comes in at night shift. He takes the box of all the parts. He goes right through the factory, out to the back door, and hands it to Wozniak. Wozniak takes it home and works on it, and it comes up with the most genius system ever created. And he presents it to Atari, gets all the money to go to India, right? So I was like, I just need to build relationships. So I made a couple of phone calls that afternoon to my relationships, and I brought on a couple of partners ultimately that brought their relationships to the table. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And then we went on this run. We were brought in tons of money, millions of dollars, and I was able to take back the business 100% and pay off the 1.5 plus interest. It was like 2.1. Called every person, negotiated out of their equity, and they all got a great return.
Mm.
And it was like, and I couldn't have done it myself. I just realized you have to be humble and understand, hey, you are not. You need a team. You need people around you that are smart. It's like good to great. Get the right people on the bus first, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
How do you feel like you get those people around you? I think there's a ton of people
Mm-hmm.
that they're just going after it alone, and
Mm-hmm.
they would love to have other teammates,
Yeah,
other partners, but the the how is can be tricky to a lot of people.
for sure. So from day forward, I'm like, I'm going to be a network or relationship builder. I'm going to get comfortable being uncomfortable and going up to someone that I don't know and building relationships. So I built ways to build relationships over the next several years of running a business. And the most common thing people can do is they have a phone that probably has hundreds of contacts in it that you've already made. And you're one or two contacts away from getting what you want in business. But people don't. It's like you got diamonds sitting in your backyard. Look at your phone, ask yourself one of two questions. Is there anyone in here that would be a good customer first and foremost? I have a product. I want to sell my product. Who can buy my product? Number one. Number two is who would be a good referring partner? Maybe they have their own customers or their own following that can refer business to me. Start there. Those are the
Mm.
two. You just want to bring in revenue. That's like, the iHub, going back to the iHub, I'm like, hey, just go create money, right?
It sounds like that always boggles my mind when that's not the initiation
Yeah.
of founders. It's like you gotta create money,
Yeah.
because that's gonna be your gasoline to whatever vehicle you're driving.
100%. I'm good friends with Sam Taggart. He wrote the book, Eat What You Kill.
Yep.
And he talks about how often this happens where someone comes in and says, hey, I want to do a window cleaning business, but I got to wait till I get enough money to do X, Y, Z, and I need the perfect things. And his point's like, no, go knock doors, go make sales, use a Windex and rags, and just start, because that's the stop. It's the start that stops you, right? So a lot of these entrepreneurs just wait and wait and wait and wait and overanalyze, and there's no revenue coming in. And how long can they really pull that off before their family's freaking out? And so just bring in revenue.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen people spend weeks making their logo before
Mhm.
they have a company. It's
Yes,
like,
100%.
I don't know if that's the greatest route to start.
No, no. It's like go bring in dollars.
Yeah,
Good sales solves a lot of problems for your business, right? You're bringing in revenue. People are feeling great. They're making more money. It's like that's what creates momentum, right?
definitely.
Yeah.
And as you're creating that momentum as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
what do you feel like it really takes to be a top-notch leader that can influence and build these great teams?
Yeah. So I think I love Stephen R. Covey. First, seek to understand,
Yeah.
and then to be understood, right? So, like, if you're building, initially, I met Kevin O'Leary, and we had this business of tax. We're like solving the tax problem for small business owners, right?
Mm.
If you're a small business owner, no one helps you in tax. So you go get something off the shelf. Well, you're not a tax. There's a great book called Who Not How, and we ask ourselves the wrong questions all the time. How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do that? And we end up becoming a bottleneck, and we can't be everything to everyone. So in the tax world, we're like, we want to solve this problem for the small business owner. No one handles that, and they're underserved. So we were like, who could we work with who would be a phenomenal brand? And it was Kevin O'Leary, right?
Yeah.
Phenomenal. He's seeing millions of people see his brand a week. He's been on this campaign to help people understand, small business owners, hey, you need to work in this tax. So we knew Kevin from a previous life. So we met him years ago, did a lot of events with Kevin. Awesome guy.
Which is crazy. That
Awesome guy.
yeah.
Phenomenal. He's got a hard edge on the show. So he tells the story that the first time he did Shark Tank, he had his mentor on set, and he tells the entrepreneur, he's like, "Hey, it's not for me, but good luck. Keep going. Go crush, you know." And his mentor's like, "Why'd you just say that?" He's like, "Say what?" I just, and he's like, by the time they hit Shark Tank, they've hawked their house, they've hawked everything, they've raised money sometimes, and they're just on this mission. And you're in a position of authority. You should tell them that business was a bad business and take it out back and shoot it."
Mm.
And he made a commitment from that time forward. He was going to have that edge, and he was going to tell him exactly how he felt because he was in that position of power and authority to tell him that.
Mm.
So that's where you see him on the show. Sometimes he's got a really hard edge,
Yeah.
but he feels that's his obligation. And now America loves that stuff. They love the real talk because they know that's when they see a business. I've been on the Shark Tank set twice, seeing some of these entrepreneurs come up. You know, this is a bad business. This is not going anywhere. And someone's got to tell them that, right?
Yeah, because they drop everything in their world to make this dream happen, where if they did a couple trial and error tests, it could show very quick, like this won't scale.
100%. So we pitch him on Tax Hive, and like 3 minutes in, he cuts us off, and we think the deal's over. It's just we didn't do it on the TV show. We just did it around a table in the Westin in Arizona. 3 minutes in, he's like, stops us, and we think the deal's sunk. And I still remember the pit in our stomachs. We're looking around going, okay, what's the deal? Is this? And he said, hey, I'm in. Let's do this and make this happen. And he jumped on board as a partner at Tax Hive. And so we heavily market his brand, but it's really just seeking to understand what they're doing, right? Just seek to understand. Like he'd been presenting this stuff about tax forever. He didn't have a solution for it. So now it's like, hey, we understood this piece of Kevin is like, he was talking about it all the time. Now we're the solution for it. So seek to understand and then to be understood. This is how we can fit into your world, your ecosystem, right?
That's so cool. And I imagine he gets pitched thousands and thousands. And I think there's a really good lesson right there. That whole seek to understand, it's like going to be a doctor. And if they're, I remember, actually, this is a perfect example. I was in Mexico and I got this like bump on my forehead. And I'm like, I got to go see what is happening here.
Yeah.
So I go in, and the doctor comes in, and no, it was actually the nurse that came in. She touches it and she goes, "Oh, that's really bad. We need to do a surgery right now." And I'm like,
jeez,
like, you don't even know anything
Right.
about what just
Yeah.
like what this is.
right.
And so I left. I just left. I
Yeah.
was like, there's no way. She
Yeah,
does not
pretty scary.
understand
Yeah.
what is going on with my body. She
Right.
literally just touched it and she's like, "Yep, we got it. We got to
open
cut
you
that
up.
all." Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the power of diving in
Yeah.
to their needs, are like
Mm-hmm.
like filling them out before just giving the whatever they need,
Right.
before you actually know, is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
I feel like people, especially funding,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, hey, this is what we have to offer, without understanding anything about what the investor is
Yeah.
looking for.
100%. So one time, so Kevin donates his time to Harvard. He did, one time I was with him, he was in Boston, did Harvard, and he was speaking to MBA. It was actually the top level doctorate in MBA program. Hour before, his laptop literally just stops working. And so he's like, "Oh, I got to go fix this." So I got the car, pulled around. I took him to the mall. And between the parking lot and the fix-it store, I think he got pitched 30 times. Anyone sees a shark
Yeah.
and they're an entrepreneur or they're an inventor,
You gotta shoot your
They
shot.
just latch on, and every pitch was like, "Oh, hey Kevin, look at this! I got this product. Oh, Kevin, I got this app. I mean, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen." And he's just like kind of being cordial and walking around, but I'm like, no one asked him one question.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, no one asked him, say, "Hey Kevin, what are you looking for in your investments?" Right? And people have an ecosystem. We all do because of ego and everything else, and we're so anxious. We want to talk about that ecosystem and our incredible product. But what about other people's? Especially the bigger the brand, the bigger the vision, and the bigger the ecosystem. So ask those successful people about that vision. What are they looking for? What are they hoping to accomplish? What do they see the future of their brand looking like? And then as they talk, you can say, oh, well, this is how I can fit into their world, right?
Mm.
That's what it's all about. People always forget that. They just want to throw up on people, right?
It's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, with you and your story,
Mm-hmm.
I still want to build you a little bit, as
Mm-hmm.
in, like, I think most people that will get to know you or your
Mm-hmm.
network,
Mm-hmm.
like they know Shawn Finnegan
Mm-hmm.
as a networker,
Yep.
relationships, and a baller in business.
Mm-hmm.
What have been some pivotal things that have changed your life forever?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what have been the moments that
Yeah.
have really influenced who you are?
Well, right now I have three daughters. So I have a couple. I have one in business and then one in personal life. So I have three daughters. I have two married daughters, right? And I was the girl daddy always growing up, right? And I have these three girls. They're just these little girls I was raising. And everyone tells you, oh, it's cliche. It's like, oh, they grow up fast. And I'm like, they're never grown up. These are these little girls. They're always like my little babies. And so I was a all-in girl daddy. We're talking about going to the mall. We're talking about mani pedis. We're talking about I'm all in on the girl daddy stuff, right? And what I found is early on when I was going to have my first baby girl, I met with one of my mentors, Brian Tracy. He's a sales trainer, and I was terrified because I was like, I was raised really with brothers. I have an older sister, but I don't know how do I handle a little baby girl. And his advice was the best. He's like, you need to read these 10 books. And I actually had to go to work. And what I found is the confidence of the daughters come from the confidence of the father and building them up.
Mm.
A lot of fathers try to do tough love and do the tear down things. No, you need to build these girls up. You need to spend time with them, specifically talk about their talents and their skills and their beauty and very specific physical features and build them up, put the armor on, because when they get out in the world as teenagers, there's a lot of mean girls and they tear them down. So you have to constantly build up your daughters, is what I found, right? So I have two married daughters now, and I have this young 18-year-old to my last one. So my whole perspective changes. Like literally I want to spend every minute with this little girl. She's my best friend, right? And I've learned so much. Like recently, I took my daughter and our dog to the park, and we're walking around and hear this loud crash and bang, literally right next to the park, right where we are. And we look over, and this poor lady got in this big freaking
Oh,
collision. They're not injured, but the lady gets out of her vehicle and she sits on the curb and she's crying and she's talking on the phone, and we're like 20 yards away. So we're already walking down the sidewalk. And so I have my dog and we're walking down the sidewalk, and I turned to my daughter and I was like, oh my gosh, that was traumatic. You okay? And I look back and my daughter's not there. I'm like looking around, and I look down, and my daughter's sitting next to the lady on the curb. And my daughter, 18-year-old's got her arm around her. And she's like, are you okay? Right? Is there anything we can do for you? You know what I mean? And I'm like, this was the most, like, you talk about Christ-like, like this is it. This is like from the mouth of babes what you learn from this little 18-year-old that didn't even say, hey, Dad, do you think I should go over there? She just went immediately up to this person who was suffering and spent time with her, right? Those are the kind of things you learn as a parent, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. There's nothing better I'd rather do than spend time with my daughters, right?
then you see that your favorite best friend little girl
Yeah.
be a hero.
Yeah,
What does
100%.
that mean to you?
Yeah, it's like you just have these moments like that. There's certain moments that are engraven in your mind that are just such life lessons. You're supposed to be the mentor and trainer, but you're getting taught by your kids all the time, right? That's what
Uh,
it's all about.
that's awesome.
Yeah, man.
So we had the business Shawn,
Yeah.
and we got the daddy daughter date Shawn
Yes,
too.
sir. Yep.
Um, with you, what have been some of the most impactful learnings as becoming a parent
Mm-hmm.
and teaching these kids how to be the best versions of themselves?
Yeah. So one of the things I've learned is they need feedback. You can't go silent. You can't lash out. You have to give feedback. It's a Crucial Conversations book. It's one of the most transformational books I've ever read. It's all about having crucial conversations and giving feedback. And what I've learned is I have this good buddy. His name is Kelly Cardenas, and he's got the coolest hair ever because it's dreadlocks. And I went to an event, and he was holding this journal looking thing. And I was like, "Oh, do you journal a lot?" And he's like, "No, these are the notes I write for my family." He writes one for his wife, and he writes one for his daughter and his son. And he pulls out and he shows me what he writes for him. And I'm like, that's something I could do. And so he actually gave me one of those books, and that's something that I've practiced is I'll sit down and write letters, very specific, still to my married daughters, right? And I'll take a picture of it and send it to them. But I keep this whole book of feedback and information that I try to give my family, right, on a regular basis. It's so important. It's like it's critical as a father, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So he taught you that. You've been doing it. What do you feel like that's done to your relationship with them?
You know, you never know how much they read or what they think, but then all of a sudden those things will come out.
Yeah.
And like I'm talking about specific, according to what I read, is you have to give them very specific physical features and mental and emotional features that they have that are great and strong. Like for instance, like I was like with my daughter, I was like, "Oh, your cheekbones are so well manicured," and I could see her later like feeling her cheekbones, right? And then when she goes to school and a mean girl says, "Hey, your nose is weird," she's like, "Oh, it's not. No, it's not," right? You just build again that armor and that resistance so they can handle the tough stuff out there.
Mm. As a as like your own legacy, and hopefully it's a lot later down the road, but
Mm-hmm.
when your daughters are at your funeral,
Yeah,
what do you want them to remember about you?
yeah, it's a great question. So I've always been this business person. And when my dad retired from being a bookstore manager, I rented out the Blue Room at BYU Stadium because he's the biggest Cougar fan on the planet Earth. And I remember sitting in there and all of his posterity, like all his kids, family, everything were there. And they showed this, the Green Day song, and they're showing slides of grandpa with their kids and grandkids. And I had the strongest impression come to me at that moment. This is actually true success. This is it. Business is great, but at the end of the day, this is your legacy, right? It's these, and that I want one day to be in that room where my kids are doing the same slideshow, the same talking about me, getting up and telling stories, that kind of stuff. That's what it's all about.
Dang. So yeah, it really does all come down to
It
relationships,
does,
right?
man.
That's cool. For you, what do you feel like you just want? Like, what's your message that you want
Mm-hmm.
to share
Yep.
from the mountaintops?
Yeah.
Like, what do you wish that everyone just understood?
Yeah. On the business side, a lot of entrepreneurs say, "Hey, I'm word of mouth," and that's great. But I've never met anyone where I felt like they were really good at it.
Hmm.
Really good at it. So it's the most common problem I've seen. Word of mouth in most people's minds is, "Oh, I go to some events, I try to meet a few people, move them down the path," versus what's your real strategy? And I learned that early on. I was like, I can go to events and get a seat at the table, or should I create my own table? I'm going to create my own table. And that's why I started the X Room. That's why I started my own thing.
Hmm.
Because I was like, there's certain things I feel like the greatest way to scale is scale relationships in business. but people don't do that very well, right? So I created this X Room event. It's every quarter, and I get top tier business owners in a room, and magic happens. There's no long presentations. It's 10 minutes, and it's rare. So if you miss one X Room, you're not going for 6 months. And I've created this table, and my presentation is, hey, lean into transactions, do lifelong business together, actually do business, because on the other side of doing business with someone is your best relationships, right? It's the ones you're
Yeah.
talking to every day. It's the ones you're going to a lunch with because you're strategizing, and yet people will say don't do transactions. Like, why not? So I'm a big believer in creating that culture where it's like, hey, we're local business owners. It's hard. Let's work together. You have a community, I have a community. Let's do some promotions again. And so I've done 10 of these events over the last few years, and it is like insane how many times I hear, hey, we met at this event and we've done this together and we've done this joint venture together, and it's like 7 figures. It's like, so if you're doing word of mouth, what is your true strategy? Create your own table. Create something that's a magnet for people that they all want to be a part of. Don't just go like the old style. I'm going to this one event and I'm going to meet a few people and I hope I can follow up. And most people don't follow up, and the riches are made in that follow up, but there's just so much more that can be done. That's my thing. It's like, create an affiliate program, create your own table, create real traffic to your business and scale.
Yeah. I used to go to tons of networking stuff, and I feel like for the past 3-4 years,
Yep.
I've just wanted to grow these outstanding relationships.
Yeah.
And sincerely, it makes a big impact in your day-to-day world if you learn how to utilize it in a positive win-win scenario.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There's so many networking events that just completely suck.
Yeah. I know.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I kind of got burnt out of
Yeah, sure.
most of them.
Yeah.
I went to one of your events.
Uh-huh.
I think it was probably like a week after we met, actually. And it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, you're right. You brought legit business people. This,
Yeah.
not people saying they do business. Like, these guys are a real deal.
Yeah.
And so, just from my experience, it's been really cool. So I love what you're doing.
Yeah. So I think, so I feel like I'm on a reality TV show, I swear, on this one, because I go to so many events. Like, I'm at events 3 to 4 times a week, and I say no to probably, I don't know, tons, right? So I'm trying to figure out, like, what makes a great event for someone who coming into that room, right? And so I went, my friends were doing this shooting range event like a few months ago, and I sat by the door for like a first hour while people were showing up. I just wanted to see how they showed up. And for the most part, 75% came in like this with their phone, and they're just looking at their phone as they come in. They go over into the corner. You want to talk to me right now? It's like, I look busy. I don't look approachable. And that's how people show up. For the most part, that's what I saw. As opposed to, I believe that door is literally a portal, and you come in with real intention. I mean, we said a prayer at the beginning of this. You started with an intention at the beginning of this podcast. Is like, what's your intention? And as you walk through the door, what are you going to do? How are you going to show up?
Totally.
And so I've been testing this out, and you can try it at home. But go into that door and your chest is out, you're physically there and you're present, your phone's in your pocket. You walk straight to the center of the room where the promoter generally is. Go up to that promoter, shake the hand, start talking. Don't stand on one foot, stand on both feet, the power position, and just stand there. And what's crazy is you'll get people come up to you and say, oh, are you promoting this event? Or you, because they see you talking with the promoter. Like, why don't people do that? It's like, go right up to the promoter. Hey, great to meet you. Hey, I have a tax business. Anyone in here you think I should talk to? Yeah, you should talk to so-and-so. Oh, would you mind introducing me?
They know everyone.
They want to make a successful event. They want it to be a good experience. So they're like, walk over, Jackson. Hey, meet Shawn. You guys have, and then all of a sudden I got introduced by someone who has credibility, and you're in the room because they invited you. There's all these things, right? It's how you show up. And then anyone I meet that I feels like a good connection, like I feel like I can do business together. Not everyone.
Yeah.
I actually set an appointment up right there. I say, hey, Jackson, do you mind if we set an appointment now? Because I know if I leave those doors, sometimes I get lost in the shuffle, but I feel like there's a great fit with what you're doing and what we're doing. How's your Tuesday next week
You
look?
set the
I
meetings.
leave with appointments. No one does that.
Yeah,
Very few do that.
I
So
love
most
that.
people are like, oh, I'll follow up later.
Follows
It's
through.
never gonna come.
Mm.
Now it's awkward. Now I get home like, Jackson, I met you at the thing. Which thing was that?
Yeah.
No.
6 months goes by.
Yeah, the day before I just hit him with a text. Hey, looking forward to meeting you tomorrow at 2:00. Just
Simple.
if they just did that, anyone who watching this would put a multiple on their sales if you're doing word of mouth.
Love it.
Just that thing. Just use that strategy right there. If you take nothing from this,
And
try that out and you'll come away with 3 or 4 appointments and you'll end up doing a lot of business that way. I've done a ton.
yeah, I like that. So go to kind of like the person leading things out and introduce yourself. It's so powerful to just bring awareness to who you are as a
Yeah.
person.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't need to be a selfish thing where you're like, hey, Kevin O'Leary, like this is everything I'm doing.
Yeah.
But like get to know them too
Yeah.
and see if they need any help. I
100%.
try to do this with every interaction where it's beneficial to me. It's
Yeah.
just like, how can I add value to
Yes.
what
Lead
you're
with
trying
value.
to accomplish?
100%. Law of reciprocity, right?
Yeah. There's no reason that it has to be a win-lose
Yeah.
situation. Almost, I think ever. Like you can make it a
100%.
win-win scenario.
Yeah.
And so making it that win-win scenario, bring them around to like get them to connect you with whoever.
Yeah.
And add value to the people around you.
Yeah.
I love it.
Never do lunch alone.
Mm.
So I learned this from Kevin years ago. It was like 3 years ago. It was like maybe November, December, and I was like, "Hey, Kevin, do you do any New Year's resolutions?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "What's it going to be for you this next year?" And he's like, "I'm going to figure out." Now, have you ever been around someone who's like extremely busy and most efficient person? You feel like a slacker. That's him. He literally if you look at his schedule, it's scheduled on the 30.
Yeah.
All day long. And he doesn't have to. So he's like, yeah, next year I want to be 10% more efficient with my time, which represents probably an hour plus in business a day. And I'm like, that's impossible. Literally, it's impossible. I mean, I feel like such a slacker. I'm like, hey, text me or call me because I feel like being around him is like really intense because of how driven this guy is.
Yeah.
I love it. But so I didn't see him again till like February, and I was like, hey, Kevin, were you able to do your goal? And he's like, yeah. I was like, how'd you do it? I've seen your schedule. It's freaking nuts. And he's like, he looked at it closely and he found that there was holes in his schedule. And those holes represented times he had to have food. And he's like, I could fill those holes. So if he goes into San Diego, he'll have his assistant set up an appointment with a top business person in San Diego. They do dinner together. He has to eat dinner. Brings in content creators. He has this incredible conversation with another business owner in San Diego, and they film content, and he creates content while he's doing dinner. And I was like, oh man, my schedule was not even a fraction of his schedule. That's something I can do. So I made a goal. I was like, I could do lunches. I'm gonna do lunches. And so right now I have my lunches scheduled for like 3 weeks, and I get someone for an hour to an hour and a half. Pound for pound, where are you going to get a better return than that on your time? Meeting with someone who's a potential partner for an hour?
It's money. Yeah,
Compare that to a
crazy.
Zoom call that people do.
100%.
Right? So Never Do Lunch Alone. There's a book entitled Never Do Lunch Alone. Build relationships through lunches.
It sounds like a book. It sounds good. Who have been kind of your mentors along your journey so far?
So I have a grandpa from Scotland. My mom's from Scotland. She's a scrappy Scottish, and he was mean. Like he was a former professional rugby player, and
not like a Utah rugby player. Like this is Scotland rugby.
We're talking break your nose and pull you to you get knocked out. They just drag you to the side. Literally those kind of stories. And he was semi-pro everything, semi-pro soccer player. So this guy was tough, and he came out and taught me how to play golf. And I still remember him yelling, "Heat down!" now, yelling, like keeping my head down. And I still literally, if I golf right now, my grandpa's voice is in my head. And here's a guy who's older when he's teaching me, and he took hours. And I didn't appreciate it at the time because he's such a codger, but he took hours of his time every day to take me out into the field next and have me hit rocks with this old club and just teach me the fundamentals of the game. You know what I mean? And like, and so that translates to all things in life. Like, how do you spend your time? Who do you spend it with? And how do you actually help people and mentor people? And I learned the mentoring piece from my grandpa,
Mm.
right? Tough.
Be tough. Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts you feel like you want to share today?
No, I was thinking about my grandpa the other day because my mom was raised Presbyterian in her faith, and she was taught, that God was in the form of a cloud.
Mm.
And so as a young girl, she never actually could build relationship with the Heavenly Father, with God.
Mm.
Because every time she closed her eyes, she saw this nebulous cloud, right?
Interesting.
She meets a couple of young missionaries. They teach her that God is a father, and she, for the first time in her life, she can actually close her eyes and build a relationship with God, right? So she decides to join, the faith and leave the Presbyterian faith. Well, the Presbyterian minister comes over and tries to convince her and all her siblings not to. And my grandpa, who never joined in this life, he stepped in and stood up for his daughters that joined, right? And it's like, I've been thinking about that story lately of what really drove him, because he saw something so good for his daughter finally building a relationship with God, first time in her life. And someone's there to talk her out of it. And he steps in and helps her, right?
Mm.
Those are the kind of things, right, that I think about with him.
Yeah. It's amazing. What that brings me to a point. What's kind of the spiritual journey been like for you?
Yeah. So, from that decision of my mom, joining the church early on, you look at the ripple effects that's happened from it.
Yeah.
You talk about legacy. Here's someone who moved to Utah, left the Presbyterian faith, left her family to start a new life here. And then if you kind of just start looking at all the ripples from that, right? My brother serves a mission. He goes to Scotland on his mission, teaches my grandparents.
No way.
They never joined, but he teaches them. And I went to Scotland a few years ago, and I went to church, and I was sitting in the stand, in the audience, and there's someone up on the stand. He like kind of recognizes me, and he's like, comes up and talks to me. He's like, "Hey, your brother baptized me, brought me to the faith years ago, like 20 years ago." And now he's sitting up there, right?
Mm.
And it's like, you think about this one decision of a woman that had faith and started building relationship with God, and how much that affects future generations. It's not like 10 people.
It's
It starts
generation.
turning into thousands by the time you start doing the math. And I've thought a lot about that, like how important our decisions are
Mm.
for our future generations, right? In faith.
Yeah. It's really cool. In my company where we're capturing people's lives and their stories,
Mm.
I think faith is such a big key to a lot of people's success.
Mm-hmm.
And it's typically foundational to who they are
Mm.
at some point or another. And a lot of people will end up going through times without God or,
Mm.
whatever that forces to you
Mm-hmm.
in their life. And that's when they learn how necessary they
Mm-hmm.
want to have a higher and more powerful being
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in your journey,
Mm-hmm.
when has there been a lower point where you saw God's hand in your world?
I mean, definitely, like the trauma of that business, I turned to God a lot, because unfortunately, we're human beings, and we wait till we're struggling and suffering to turn, right, which
Yeah.
isn't good. But there was so many times, even just getting a phone call. You think that happened by coincidence that my controller found 3,000 in cash when I was at my one of my darkest moments? And I have like 10 of those stories. But then you all of a sudden you look back and you're like, you know what? It's the greatest thing ever, right? I remember years ago I worked at AOL Time Warner. It was like ancient company, okay? And I loved it. I lived in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm driving down. There's a street there called Speedway. I'm driving down. It's like I remember seeing the palm trees in the blue sky, and I had one of the strongest promptings in my life, and it said, "This job isn't for you." I'd been working on weekends. I wasn't going to church because I was working all the time. I was losing my faith. I know for a fact. And I get this strong. There's certain times in life where it's literally so powerful that you can't deny what you just heard. And that was one of those moments. And I actually didn't want to do it. I was like, no, I love it here. I'm doing great. I'm excelling. I just got promoted 3 times. I'm crushing. And within 3 days, I got laid off in that job. And then I remember standing out on the corner, calling my wife, just like, I don't know what to do. Just got laid off. I had like, I don't know where to go. And it was scary. And then start from there. I get a new job that's freaking phenomenal. And then I start my business with phenomenal. And so you look back, and in those moments, you couldn't convince me that that was a good thing. But now you look back and you're like, you can see God's hand in your life, right? That changes the course. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I'm so grateful that that happened. But in the moment, you're scared and it's terrifying. No. And that's not the moment you want. And you fight against it. You're like, because we're finite beings. We can't see what tomorrow looks like. But Definitely. He can, right?
I think this week I've had 2 or 3 conversations about just the life painting that we're all doing, and as we're creating these dots, looking forward or even in the present, most of these dots don't make sense. Yeah. A lot of them don't make sense. Yeah. And you don't know how critical some of these dots are in your painting. Yeah. But looking back, you see the wonders and the beauty of these little necessities of your life to create the most beautiful painting. And I think a really important lesson is always do your part. Like do your part, but also have the faith and realization that God does his part. Yeah. And so if you're going through a really hard time, if you're proactively pushing and you're doing it with faith, God does his part. Yeah. And I have a scripture that kind of altered my life from a decently younger age, but it's in the New Testament and in the Book of Mormon, but it's Jesus talking about like what to think about and what to care about. And there's a part where he says, you know, don't worry about what you are going to eat tomorrow or what you're going to wear. God knows all these things, aka God knows everything that you're going through. Yeah. And then he makes a promise, and it's my favorite promise, and it simplifies my life so much. But all it is put God and his righteousness first, and all these things will be added unto you. And that, Amen to that is the core to my confidence of being able to do whatever I feel like I want to accomplish and feels aligned with God's will. Like it will be done. Yeah. And I know it will. Yeah. And I just have to be patient and try and do my best as a human to be a good person and try and put God first. Yeah. And beautiful miracles happen all the time that were unnecessary. Yeah. In that moment. But again, back to painting the picture, I've had these dots painted where now I can see back how crucial these little events were. And so the invitation is continue to press forward and know that God does his part. And that's just what I felt Amen strongly I wanted to share.
Well done. Yeah. I think there at the time when you're going through hard things you don't see the clarity sometimes, but then looking back, in hindsight, you can see his hand in it, and you're like, there's clarity for you. Because it's a lot, we can look back in history and say, oh, this door shut, but a new door, he opened a new door for me, right?
But that door shutting, it's the end of the world. Right, at the time. You can't go back to this time machine and in that moment, me standing on that corner and say, this is the best thing that's ever going to happen to you, right? And that's where it's like life is happening for you and
Yeah.
not to you.
Yeah.
And so stay abundant, whatever you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want to share today.
Yeah. It's great.
Shawn, it's been an honor.
It's great. Thank you,
And
Jackson.
you're a stellar guy who in the Utah community and obviously past that is making a difference, and highly appreciate your effort to make the world better through bringing people together, and you do it very well.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
So
Appreciate the invitation.
yeah, much love, and everyone at home, keep pushing through. Much love.